Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? It's your boy, The Doc, and we're back for the Week 14 injury update show. You guys know the deal by now. Every single week, I go through the entire NFL slate, tell you about all the injuries that you need to know about for your fantasy teams so you can kick back, relax, and enjoy the weekend knowing that the fantasy headliners got you covered. But we got a lot to talk about, so let's get into it. All right, guys, sadly, we do have to start with a moment of silence for not one, but two wide receivers this week. First up, wide receiver Tank Dell for the Houston Texans has a fibula fracture, came into week 13 with a calf injury, but was rolled up on during a running play. Why was the 5'8", 170-pound wide receiver blocking on a run play? You ask me. Doesn't really make much sense. He got rolled up on, broke his ankle. He is done for the year. Disappointing end to a really great season for the rookie wide receiver. And then wide receiver Christian Kirk went down with a groin injury, landed hard after making a catch and immediately grabbed his groin. Never want to see that for any dude, but let alone one of your best wide receivers. Left the game, didn't return. Imaging likely showed an inguinal hernia, but they didn't officially announce that. So I'm speculating with the inguinal hernia, but he needs surgery, is expected to miss the rest of the regular season. So you can go ahead and drop him off of your fantasy teams and pour one out in the chat for those two guys. Appreciate their contributions to our fantasy teams this season. Now, we do have two teams on bye, Cardinals and Commanders, so we're not going to talk about them. I'm going to briefly talk about Thursday Night Football, Pats at my Steelers. Disappointing game for the Steelers fans out there. A loss again. We're not sure what's going to happen, but you don't want to be losing to this Pats team. Ezekiel Elliott looked like he was 2016 Ezekiel Elliott. Absolutely shredded the Steelers defense, but that was only possible because running back Ramondre Stevenson is out with a high ankle sprain. And based on the video, it looks like a pretty classic high ankle mechanism. I would not be surprised if we don't see Stevenson play again this year. Even if he does return in the next couple weeks, you're probably better off not starting him in fantasy coming off that high ankle sprain. Ezekiel Elliott could potentially be a league winner, or he just got a really great matchup against a bad Steelers defense. Bad Steelers defense in the linebacker core. I'll put it that way. Wide receiver Demario Douglas still out with a concussion as well for the Pats. For the Steelers, Kenny Pickett wasn't able to play. He's got an ankle sprain. Looked less severe than Stevenson's, but let's be honest, if you're starting Pickett in fantasy, you probably don't have to worry about the playoffs, and you're probably not worried if you have to drop him. I'd expect him to miss about 2 to 3 weeks with this injury. Moving on to the early Sunday games, we got Bucs at the Falcons. Bucs dealing with a lot of injuries on the defensive side of the ball, but one guy that is expected to come back this week, linebacker Levante David. He's coming off that groin strain. Back practicing in full, looks like he's on track to return, but Devin White, Jamel Dean, and Vita Vea all not practicing. Look like they are all going to miss this game against the Falcons. For the Falcons, cornerback AJ Terrell is going through concussion protocol. He is getting limited work in, so there is a chance at least that he could play, but he's going to be a game time decision. Moving on to the Rams at the Ravens. Rams tight end Tyler Higbee has a neck injury, not practicing. Very unlikely that he suits up in this game. Wide receiver Puka Nacua dealing with a shoulder injury. Got a full practice in on Thursday, though, so I do expect him to play. He managed to come back in last week's game. Now that he's practicing in full, again, expect him to play in this game, but he may just be one of those guys that dies every single week and then comes back from the dead. It's hard to say that he's not banged up often. It could be something with this shoulder that he needs to get looked at in the offseason, but for right now, he's playing, and you're definitely starting him if you can. And then wide receiver Cooper Kupp, a good injury update here, was not listed at all on the injury report. He's been dealing with the low ankle sprain. Looks like that has healed up enough to where he's getting full reps in practice again. And then for the Ravens, quarterback Lamar Jackson is sick, dealing with an illness, didn't practice on Thursday. I doubt that he misses the game. It's very rare that players actually miss a game, even if they're sick on Thursday, but keep an eye on it for Lamar Jackson. You never know what's going to happen with guys being sick. Next game is Lions at the Bears, but neither one of these teams have an injury to talk about. So we're going to head straight in to the Colts at the Bengals. Colts running back Jonathan Taylor has a UCL tear in his thumb. UCL, you actually have two of them. You have one in your thumb, one in your elbow. This is the thumb injury here. It's also called skier's thumb. It's basically the ligament on the inside of your thumb when it gets pulled out. That ligament tears. Is not practicing. Initial reports were it was going to be a 2 to 3 week recovery timeline, but last week, Rappaport did come out and say that Jonathan Taylor's surgeon is expecting more of a 3 to 5 week recovery for this. That sounds more correct based on what the injury was. We didn't have that info last week. We have it now. The team is still playing for a playoff spot, though, so there is a chance that he could come back by week 16 or 17, but I'd make sure that you have a more permanent plan in place if he can't go. I'm probably not dropping him yet until we get official word that he's not coming back. Would hate to see Jonathan Taylor get picked up by somebody competing for a championship in your league. That's how leagues get ruined, people. You got to hold on to these guys at the end of the year. Make sure nobody's getting an unfair advantage on the waiver wire. As for the Bengals, wide receiver Tyler Boyd dealing with an ankle sprain, limited on Thursday. Must have picked up this ankle injury during practice because he wasn't injured on Sunday. Should be able to go, though, and he's not really a great option for fantasy unless you're really desperate for wide receiver help. Moving on to the Jags at the Browns. Jags quarterback Trevor Lawrence dealing with a high ankle sprain. Didn't practice on Wednesday, but did get some limited work in on Thursday. He got stepped on and then got his ankle kind of rolled up under him and then walked maybe 2, maybe 3 miles to the locker room. A lot of people upset that he wasn't carted off, but it is actually a good sign for us if we're looking at video analysis that there was no fracture. So typically with an ankle sprain, if a guy is able to put weight on the ankle, it's a good sign that the ankle is not broken. It's not always a guarantee, but it is one of the things that you look for when you're watching analysis and doing video analysis for ankle injuries specifically. If they can't put weight on it, there's a chance that there is a fracture, but the fact that he could put some weight on it and walk that far is a good sign that this is not as serious of an ankle injury as it looked like it could have been based on the initial video of the injury. The bad news is I don't think that he's actually going to be able to play this week. Quarterback CJ Beathard coming in, has a shoulder injury, limited practices so far, did manage to lead some key drives in force overtime in that game, but he is banged up and should start, though, if Trevor Lawrence isn't able to play. Running back Travis Etienne dealing with a rib injury, limited in practice. He's hurting, but again, I expect him to be able to play through. And then wide receiver Zay Jones still missing some practice with the knee injury that he's had for most of the season. He should play as well. As for the Browns, wide receiver Amari Cooper dealing with concussion and rib injuries, has not been practicing, isn't in line to basically be able to clear concussion protocol. Don't expect him to play this week. Running back Kareem Hunt has a groin injury, limited in practice on Thursday. Dealing with this groin injury for the last couple of weeks, has really fallen off. He had a stretch of 5 games where he scored a touchdown, has really fallen off since then. I'm not really playing him in any fantasy leagues if I can avoid it. And then quarterback Dorian Thompson Robinson dealing with a concussion, back practicing in limited capacity, but I do think DTR probably lost his job to Joe Flacco, who seems to have risen from the dead to once again get dragged into the playoffs by an elite defense for one last ride. Very reminiscent of his time with the Ravens. Moving on to the Panthers at the Saints. Panthers tight end Hayden Hurst dealing with a concussion. Limited practices so far. Some news from Hayden Hurst's dad actually said that he came out and was diagnosed with post-traumatic amnesia. So typically you do see this. The idea of post-traumatic amnesia is basically this idea where it's a concussion symptom. It's a medical terminology for concussion symptoms that result in short-term memory loss, where players either can't remember things that have happened that day or can't remember things that have happened during or right after the concussion occurred. So it's not necessarily telling us anything about the severity or how long he's going to miss. It just means that he is and was still having issues with remembering things from the events directly after the concussion, and may still possibly be having issues remembering things that are happening each and every day. But limited practices, a good sign that we will see him at some point again this season. As for the Saints, tight end Taysom Hill has foot and hand issues, not practicing at all so far this week. But again, it doesn't look like it was something that he picked up during the game that was going to keep him out. I think just the added workload of them using him kind of all over the field has him a little banged up. Similar to a running back, I would expect him to be able to play through this, but Friday is really going to give us the answer. He's a game-time decision for now, but he is trending towards being able to play. Tight end Juwan Johnson dealing with a quad strain. Limited practices so far, missing some reps in practice with this quad injury, but again, he should play as well. Chris Olave is sick. Illness on Thursday, didn't practice. Same thing with him as Lamar Jackson. We don't really know when they're sick what's going to happen, but typically those guys still play, and it doesn't really affect their ability to put up numbers. Running back Kendre Miller and wide receiver Rashid Shaheed are still dealing with their injuries. Kendre's got a high ankle sprain. Shaheed has a quad strain. They're not practicing. Doesn't look like either of those guys is on track to play. And then Derek Carr dealing with concussion and rib injuries plus a shoulder strain, limited in practice. It looks like he could play this week, but there really is a case that he should not play in this game. He's hurting every single week he gets hurt. It seems like he just can't get over some of these cumulative injuries that have happened to him over the last month. The Saints need to give him a week off. Let Jameis Winston take the wheel, take it for a ride here, and see what happens. I think everyone could be better off for it. Last game of the early slate, we got Texans at the Jets. Texans offensive tackle George Fant is dealing with a hip injury. He's not expected to play. This could hurt the running game. And also CJ Stroud's ability to remain upright in the pocket. Tight end Dalton Schultz is dealing with that hamstring strain. Limited Wednesday, didn't practice on Thursday, but it's hard to tell if this was actually a setback for Schultz on Thursday or just planned rest. If he returns to practice on Friday, I think there's a pretty good chance that he plays this week. He's a risky start, knowing the re-injury risk is at its highest in the first week back from a hamstring injury, but again, he's going to be a game-time decision. We'll see what happens with the Friday practice report. As for the Jets, running back Breece Hall has an ankle sprain, not practicing, has officially not practiced yet this week, but was seen or was told reporters that he is expecting to play in this game. So I wouldn't plan on starting him in fantasy. He hasn't been good for almost 6 weeks, but it sounds like he expects to be able to play in this game. I'll believe it when I see it. He's a game-time decision. Tight end Tyler Conklin dealing with the hamstring strain, limited in practice. I think he was limited by Tim Boyle more than anything, but he is expected to play, but is more of a low-end tight end 2 based on volume alone. And then quarterback Aaron Rodgers dealing with the Achilles injury, didn't practice Wednesday, limited on Thursday. I hope you guys can tell that I'm very frustrated that I have to add Aaron Rodgers into this report. I firmly believe that he is not going to be able to come back this season. I think this is all just theatrics. It's all just, well, I could have done it if we would have been in playoff contention. It makes no sense to me why we're going through this. Actually, it does. Aaron Rodgers loves when the media is talking about him. And so if I really want to complain, I should just not mention him in this. But I digress. I don't expect him to play this week. I don't expect him to play this season. And that's it for the early Sunday games. All right, guys, let's head into the midday slate on Sunday. We got Vikings at the Raiders. Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson dealing with that hamstring injury that's kept him out since week 4. If you've managed to survive the last 10 weeks without JJ and are still in playoff contention, congratulations. He is finally expected to return. Hopefully, he's built a little bit of rapport with new starting quarterback Josh Dobbs over the last 2 weeks. I'm not expecting a wide receiver 1 week from him this week in his first week back, but I think you can pretty firmly put him into your starting lineups in this first week back. He should be well outside of the risk zone of him having a repeat injury with this hamstring issue. For the Raiders, defensive end Max Crosby dealing with a knee injury that's kept him limited in practice, but not really missing any games. Again, expect the same thing here. He's not practicing, but I expect him to play in the game on Sunday. For the next game, Seahawks at the 49ers. Seahawks linebacker Jordan Brooks is dealing with an ankle sprain. Didn't practice at all this week. Does not expect is not expected to play in this game. Running back Zach Charbonnet dealing with a knee injury. Didn't practice Wednesday, limited Thursday. It sounds like he avoided any major damage to the knee, but was limited on Thursday. And it does appear to be on track to play this week. Pretty tough matchup, though. I'm probably looking elsewhere for fantasy points if I can, unless running back Kenneth Walker is not able to return from the oblique strain. Same deal. Didn't practice Wednesday, limited Thursday. Missed last week with the oblique injury, but is back practicing at least this week, which is a good sign. Of the two running back, he's the one that I'm less confident about playing this week. He's a game time decision, but I'm still a little bit weary that he's going to be able to actually suit up in this game. Quarterback Geno Smith dealing with a groin injury, showed up on the injury report on Thursday. Was a late addition to the injury report on Thursday. Wasn't listed at all Wednesday. Put up less than 10 fantasy points the last time he played this team. So I'm probably looking for a different quarterback if I'm expecting Geno to put up big numbers, even though he had a great week last week. As for the 49ers, defensive tackle Eric Armstead dealing with foot and knee injuries. Did not practice at all this week, and Kyle Shanahan did say that he was a long shot to play. That's code for he is out this week. Probably the best game of the week, Bills at the Chiefs. Bills don't really have anyone listed as limited this week on their practice report. Everyone is a full practice, including tight end Dawson Knox coming back from the wrist surgery that he had. Is slated to return from IR this week and limiting, really, this is more about him limiting the upside of Dalton Kincaid going forward. Dawson Knox, kind of a streaming option if you really need help at tight end, but I don't really expect either of those guys to put up great numbers if they're both playing. As for the Chiefs, running back Isaiah Pacheco dealing with the shoulder injury. This is being described as a contusion. Contusion is code for bruise. It's just the medical term for bruise. He's got a bruised shoulder. I do think he ends up playing in this game, but it's worth noting that he hasn't practiced yet this week. Linebacker Nick Bolton, on the other hand, practicing in full coming off of his wrist injury, is expected to be activated off IR this week, a welcome sign for the Chiefs' run defense. He's their best tackler by a mile. As for quarterback Patrick Mahomes, he's dealing with a pec injury, but is listed as a full participant in both of the days of practice so far. Normally I wouldn't talk about someone who's practicing in full, but I figured Mahomes was probably worth being the exception. Interesting to see him listed with a pec injury. Worry about this, really anything related to this guy's shoulder. He should be fine, but hopefully we're not coming back to this as something that was a sign of things to come with Pat Mahomes with the fantasy playoffs looming. Our last game of the midday slate, we got Broncos at the Chargers. Broncos are pretty healthy, so we're just going to talk about Chargers. Wide receiver Joshua Palmer coming back from IR. The practice window is open, but he's only limited in practice. Is not practicing in full yet. Hopefully gets a full designation on Friday because Justin Herbert needs all the help he can get at wide receiver. Keenan Allen is at least off the injury report this week, but Palmer potentially coming back this week might be worth a stash if you need some juice on the bench for the playoffs. Somebody you can just throw in and hope he gets, 100 yards and a couple touchdowns. A big week could be coming in the next 4 weeks for Josh Palmer. Not a bad guy to be stashing on your bench. He's a game time decision for me this week, but trending in the right direction. If he practices in full on Friday, there's a good chance he plays. Heading into Sunday Night Football, we got Eagles at the Cowboys. Another great game here. Eagles tight end Dallas Goedert coming back from his forearm fracture. A lot of tight ends coming back this week. He's getting full practices in. I do expect Dallas Goedert to play. He was playing well before the forearm fracture took him out. Slides right back in as that top 12 tight end option if you need one. And then the Cowboys don't really have any injuries to talk about, so we're heading to Monday Night Football, and we actually have two games to talk about on Monday night this week. Titans at the Dolphins. Titans defensive tackle Jeffrey Simmons dealing with a knee injury. Didn't practice on the walkthrough, but it's already been said that he's expected to miss a few weeks with this knee injury. As for the Dolphins, offensive tackle Teron Armstead dealing with knee and ankle injuries, left the game Sunday with an ankle issue after he got rolled into. The problem with these big left tackles is that their ankles and knees tend to get rolled up on all the time. We've seen it with a few different guys around the league. These really tall, really athletic offensive tackles tend to be the ones that get caught up with players running into them. Same thing happened with Armstead this week. I'd expect him to miss this game. And then free safety Javon Holland still dealing with the knee soreness on both sides, not practicing in the walkthrough. I do expect him to be able to play, but don't expect a lot of practice time for Holland this week. Last game of the week, we got Packers at the Giants. Packers wide receiver Christian Watson dealing with the hamstring strain. Did not practice on Thursday. 2 big games in a row. Juicy playoff schedule. Everything was looking towards Christian Watson potentially leading you to the promised land after you took him high in your drafts this year. And we were hoping that maybe he could salvage that value because he really did not play well prior to a couple weeks ago. But the problem is his hamstrings are made of paper mache. And so the guy is dealing with another hamstring injury. I don't expect him to play. I don't know how you can trust him going forward in your lineups. When he's healthy, it looks like he's on the same page finally with Jordan Love. But again, the dude is made of glass. Running back Aaron Jones, another guy that's had some issues with injuries this year. MCL sprain, coming back from that. Limited in the walkthrough, is at least back practicing in a limited capacity in a walkthrough, but it's a good sign that he's on the mend here. I'd say that he's a game time decision, but I'm not expecting him to be in any of my fantasy lineups because the game's on Monday. And I just don't trust guys that are coming off an injury on a Monday night in my fantasy matchups. I'm going to find a solution for him. Even if he plays, I'd rather take the risk that he plays and puts up big numbers versus the risk that I put him in my lineup and he either doesn't play or is a complete dud coming off this MCL sprain. And then the Giants do have quarterback Tyrod Taylor coming back from the rib injury, is expected to return, but is going to be backing up Tommy DeVito instead of starting. So Tyrod Taylor not really fantasy relevant as of right now. All right, guys, that's it for the Week 14 injury update show. Is there anybody I missed? Let me know in the comments down below. I want to thank our sponsors once again for sponsoring this video. First up, we got Manscaped. Use the code HEADLINERS, get 20% off plus free shipping over at manscaped.com. Of course, check out our friends at pristineauction.com. Use the code HEADLINERS when you sign up and get a free account. Let them know that we sent you because they send us all sorts of free stuff. We just missed our like goal on last week's video, so we're setting another like goal to give away something on this video. 1,000 likes. If we get to it, I will give away something for free that Pristine Auction has sent us just for the people that watch the injury update show. But you got to be signed up using the code HEADLINERS to get a free account over at pristineauction.com to be eligible to win those prizes. And then, of course, if you guys are out, let's say you didn't make the fantasy playoffs in your fantasy league, make sure you head over to our friends at Underdog Fantasy. When you sign up using the code HEADLINERS, you get a free first deposit match up to $100. Go win some money with Underdog Fantasy and with the Headliners. But guys, that's it. That's all I got for you for the injury show this week. I hope you have a great Week 14. Let's go get into those fantasy playoffs, win some chips, and we'll see you guys next week. The Doc is out.